Hey, hi. Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, senior film writer for Now Magazine, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is Ramona Barckert, a writer and producer whose credits include Degrassi: The Next Generation, for which she won a Canadian Screen Award, as well as Wingin' It and Wynonna Earp, the feature film At Home by Myself with You, and the brand new triptych thriller Ordinary Days, which is playing theatrically right now in Toronto, Halifax, and Edmonton. Ramona picked Can You Ever Forgive Me?, Marielle Heller's recent biopic starring Melissa McCarthy as Lee Israel, a best-selling New York biographer who found a very lucrative side hustle in the early 90s as a forger of literary correspondence from the likes of Dorothy Parker and Noel Coward. Richard E. Grant plays Jack Hawk, her cheerfully dissolute enabler and accomplice, and it's a warm, almost affectionate look at a couple of misanthropic petty criminals. That contradiction, along with McCarthy and Grant's wonderful Oscar-nominated performances, makes this film ripe for rediscovery now that it's available on disc, because we all know you didn't see it when it played theatrically last fall. Also, apologies in advance for both the construction noises and the rain on this one. We tried to work around it. This is Someone Else's Movie.
What made you choose it? Well, it's a movie I watched, which is always a good starting point.
Good way in.
I don't quite understand why I can always binge watch 10 episodes of TV in 2 days, but sometimes it's challenging to get through a full movie. I find myself kind of nodding off, but I did get through this movie. And, you know, as soon as I had heard about it, and just a side note, I knew nothing about Lee Israel prior to this movie. I did not read the book. I know nothing outside of what is presented in this movie, so I am not an expert and have done no further research. So it's really just the movie itself, which I loved. But I knew I wanted to see it right away. I love stories about scams. Generally, I am interested in them. Not the ones where people, like, lose their houses and terrible things happen, but the ones that are kind of fun and, you know, end up having a good sort of moral ending to them. You know, Melissa McCarthy is always a draw for me. I love most of her stuff, even her broader comedy, which can be terrible and gross and, you know, not for everyone. I just find her to be such an appealing human actor. Mm-hmm. Especially in her drama, that she always kind of finds, no matter how much of an a-hole she's being, how awful, disgusting, there's always this layer of, like, oh, there's a real person with a real pulse underneath that. So I always like to watch her stuff. The fact that it was, you know, female creative team behind it was a big draw for me as well. And then, you know, and ultimately I'm just like a huge sucker for a writer-protagonist character. Yeah. I find that they're challenging stories. It's hard to tell stories about a writer because, you know, writers are people who sit in a room by themselves and stare at a wall, and it can be not the most dynamic or dramatic process. Yeah. So a lot of films that are about writers, I find that are they end up kind of going into freaky deaky land a little bit, just try to, you know, dramatize the process or the mindset that writer, you know, the Barton Fink. What was the one with Will Ferrell realizes he's a character in Emma Thompson? Yeah, I was like Stranger Truth, whatever. Yeah, but realizes he's a character in her novel and kind of confronts her, which is, it's all, you know, they always kind of go into that freaky deaky thing, which can be awesome and super fun. So there's you know, I just really like felt that this movie was a very like honest, grounded depiction of a writer at a certain point in their career. That is not something we see very often. You know, depicting the crippling doubt, the loneliness, the anti-socialism, you know, the anger, you know, all that stuff really felt really, not that I'm like that at all, but I feel like that, you know, it's hard to dramatize that. Stories about writers tend to be also, they're a writer and that's their occupation, but it's not really like the story is like a romantic comedy, or it's, the story's about something totally different. Where
it's every Woody Allen film where you never see the work.
Yeah, you never see
coffee shops and walking and
you never really get that interior. And I understand that because it's hard to show on a screen. It makes great novels and, you know, first person narratives and stuff like that, but it's hard to do that filmically in a way that's really doing justice to it. So that was kind of the draw for me, was this movie was just kind of, it had a couple of different elements to it, and then it being about a writer, and I felt like, I feel like this is really about a writer and what a writer's life was like, and I could dig in, and, you know, I was happy that it was out there in the world, and I could see it.
Did you see it theatrically? Did you actually catch it?
I didn't. I'm the worst, because...
Well, nobody did, so don't feel bad.
Nobody did, but I knew it was coming out. I had such high awareness of it. I was telling people, this movie's going to be... I'm definitely going to see it. I think it's going to be really cool. Never saw it. Like, weeks of being myself, like, why did I go see this movie? And then I saw it on a plane, of all things, and then got to the end and was like, this is embarrassing. I'm a little teary-eyed in the middle of the plane. I didn't think it would kind of be as emotional for me, but clearly I have some issues. But yeah, so I saw it on a plane, and then thought it was great, and then watched it again after on iTunes when it came out, and read the screenplay, just to kind of dig into it a little more and just figure out the mechanics of it. I think it's a brilliant screenplay.
Yeah, I would agree.
I think they just, and again, I never read the book, so I can't even comment on whether it's a great adaptation of the book. I just think it's a really, you know, it's one of these stories that's so small. Mm-hmm. You know, like the moves are small. There aren't like mind-blowing twists, even though there's a scam being run. Like, it's all very small, and all the beats are really small. But for her characterization, for her character, everything feels huge. Like, every move she has to make is like painful, and like she feels like such a, you know, she's making these strong choices. But when you look at the global thing, you think, oh, it's kind of small and not that big of a deal. But because her characterization in the show is so strong, that you feel you're with her on that journey. Yeah,
the stakes are ultimately pretty marginal. Except so that they're life or death, right? Yeah. Because she needs to eat.
Absolutely.
And the beats as it plays out are the stuff with the cat doesn't really go where we think it's going to go.
Yeah.
I mean, it does, but it doesn't. We're going to end up spoiling things. So
that's fine. Okay.
Worry about it.
Great.
But yeah, it's I had read the book.
Okay.
Way back. I mean, I don't even remember when. It was in the 90s, I assume. Mm-hmm. It was a long time ago.
Right.
And I remember when I heard the film was being made, I was like, okay, I'm not reading again. I'm not going to revisit it. I just want to see if the film can stand on its own. I try not to source material stuff when I can, and want to see the movie as the movie wants to present itself to me.
Right on.
But it was... Okay, I had a weird experience watching it in that it was one of the films, I think it's fair to say, at TIFF, we get cover consideration screenings where occasionally studios will reach out to us and say, do you want to watch this movie? Maybe put the person on the cover. And I've interviewed Melissa McCarthy in the past, and she's great. And Glenn and Sumi, my editor, and I were both invited to like basically our own screening of the film.
Amazing.
In the Lightbox Theater 1. So just this giant screen, big room.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we all knew, including Fox Searchlight's people, that it was a long shot just because we were really close to deadlines and had to pull the trigger on a bunch of stuff.
Okay.
And didn't end up going with it. And now I kind of feel like we should have.
Yeah.
Because we both really liked the movie.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things that... It's one of those movies that needs to sit with you for a while. And I think if we'd seen it even 2 days earlier, it would have built up enough momentum in our hearts.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's such... You know, I find it so... It feels like a 90s movie to me.
Yeah.
Oh, you know? Like, it feels like a movie that would never be made today. And yet it was. You know? Like, the strength of the characters and, like, this... It's just this two-hander, essentially. Mm-hmm. Between two characters. And... You know, and like I said, all these little tiny moves, and it's like you don't really get these stories anymore, and so I think a movie like this really flies under the radar. And you know, thankfully Melissa McCarthy's a big star, and so it draws its attention, and it gets pulled into Oscar campaigns, thankfully, because I feel like I just feel like, you know, it's one of those movies like I would love to write a movie like this because it does sort of depict the smallness of life, but like, you know, it feels so huge to the characters that you just kind of get drawn into it.
Yeah. I think part of that too is that you've got in Lee Israel, you have a character who is, you know, known for biographical detail in her obsessive research, but who is utterly oblivious to the way people see her and the way other people. I mean, what does it take her 3 or 4 encounters with Grant's character before she figures out he's homeless?
Yeah.
Because she's just not paying attention. She just doesn't care.
Yeah.
She doesn't care about other people.
It's interesting. It's because she is observant, and you see so many instances of her being smart. Mm-hmm. and doing, you know, like she's the whole thing with the toilet paper in the bathroom being like, you know, she's observant about the things that piss her off, but not super observant. But then there are these lovely moments, like with her landlord's mom. She's like, you know, your hair looks lovely today, and I brought you some milk. You were out of it, and you just sort of feel glimpses into the real human good person underneath that has been, you know, weighed down by all these other horrible character traits and flaws that she has. But it kind of glimpses in there. And it's funny you mentioned the cat, because I have theories about this cat and that story. I feel like it's actually, the cat has an arc, and it's actually, this is, I totally made up, shadow plot of Lee's story. Like, I feel like, you know, we meet the cat's not eating, the cat's shitting under the bed and drawing flies. The cat is not itself. The cat needs medicine. The medicine kind of helps for a bit, but it's only a Band-Aid solution. The cat has to die. And I feel like that whole thing is just mirroring Lee, you know, going through life, putting, you know, Band-Aid solutions on things. Like, she's never going to break through, even though she comes up with this great scheme, and it gets her, it gets her so far. It gets her to pay some of her bills, and it gets her, you know, it gets her some pride. It's like she can't ever say, this is me, I did it, you know. It's all just under the couched under, it's not me, it's someone else. And I feel like this cat plot is just, that's the brilliance of the screenplay for me, is that the cat is like, you know, this sounds crazy, I know, but like, to tell an interior story of a writer and how they're trying to articulate life and create and put it out there, and whether or not they can take ownership of all that is it's very hard to dramatize. It's hard to make plot, it's hard to make story, and I feel like this cat's, you know, obviously she loves the cat, and she is very sad when the cat dies, but the cat actually has to die for Lee to live, you know? Like, that's kind of how I feel about it. Like, you know, it's awful, but, you know, she needs to break free from the things that have kept her back.
It's just one more routine that she's created for herself. Yeah,
it's one more excuse, and she thinks, like, you know, there's tons of great scenes with the Jack character, but she makes a bit of money, and he's like, I sold some coke, so I got some money, so what are we going to do? And she's like, no, I'm noble, my money's for my cat, and it's for my house, and it's for my food, and he's just, like, all id, right? Like, he's like, well, we should go out to the bar and have fun, and she almost can't allow herself to enjoy success, you know, like that's kind of seems like her thing. It's like, you have to kind of take ownership and want success. So I just think that, you know, there's just like so many moments along the way of that, and how that's depicted, and it all builds to something, which is one of my favorite things that can never happen in a movie, is that in her greatest failure, which is getting caught, comes her success. Like, the only way she could ever succeed is to fail at the end of the story. So, like, even though it's horrible, and, you know, she gets caught and charged, and, you know, basically gets a slap on the wrist, which is also an interesting aspect to it. That's the only way it could happen for her. If she didn't do that, if that didn't happen, she would never be able to break out of her old ways and to try something new and face up to who she really is and what she wants to write. And she writes this amazing book, which is like, you know, which is the great thing. And obviously it's a true story, so it's kind of, but I think it's really, that's what I love. Like, I love the ending where a character, like, it all blows up, you know, like, they don't get away with it. It doesn't work out. And it seems like the hugest error. And from that, they get the thing that they needed all along and what they should have, you know, been striving for. But without it, they wouldn't get it. So I think,
Yeah, and you have first of all, there's the beautiful constant narrative irony of her being told she has to write in her own voice, embracing someone else's entirely, then finding out she can do it for all sorts of voices. Yeah. And then ultimately, returning
and being
to
so
her
good
own.
at it, you know, her being so good at it. And, you know, she's like, I'm more Dorothy Parker than Dorothy Parker. Like, I'm better at her than anybody.
Yeah. Which is, of course, exactly what an arrogant narcissist would say.
Yeah, and then Jack's like, yeah, but you can't take credit for it. It's not you. No one gives a shit what you did. Like, they think it's Dorothy Parker, so is that satisfying? And that's always an interesting thing for a writer to, you know, and things that I've always kind of, you know, how close to personal do you get when you write your stories? Like, I want to write stories that people want to go see. But if it's always just what I think people want to see and it doesn't come from a genuine place, it doesn't work, you know? And so over my career, I've like, you know, moved closer to that. Like I always am wondering, like, is this, you know, it's not just that it's relatable, but that it comes from a genuine place and can be relatable because, you know, it's part of you. And what stories you want to tell.
Yeah, it's a contradiction I've never fully worked out myself either. The idea that if you tell something so specific, it becomes universal, that people will embrace it. But I've also seen plenty of movies where this is just my story and I don't have any outer perspective. And yeah, I think that's right. What it is, right? You need to be able to find the point where the author comes through honestly, but also somehow acknowledges the rest of the world. And I've never figured out who can do that and who can't. Like Whit Stillman's early films, which should be impenetrable because they're about this cloistered world of wealthy, you know, Upper West Siders, Upper East Siders. I think he's on the East Side these days. But I shouldn't care about those people. Yeah. And yet every time he makes me, even through that light satirical veneer, he makes me care about them. This is another one, you said it feels like a 90s movie. It absolutely does, but it also replicates the 90s perfectly. Mm-hmm. Like that's... I went to New York for the first time in 92. I was there. Like, it's bizarre how close it is.
Yeah, it's really fantastic. And there's lots of great choices to, you know, production design wise, like the musical choices, which at first I was like, oh, this is a lot of piano. Yeah. It just makes it feel of a time, you know, and obviously her look is something very specific. And also just like the fact of like, I guess, yes, there are people who collect and paid money for letters that Noel Coward and Dorothy Parker wrote back in the day. But even that distance, too, I'm like, I can't, like, what is equivalent today of that?
Yeah.
Like, is like John like Grisham's texts, like, to his niece. Like, I don't know if that exists now. Like, is that just and so making those letters that people do find much more valuable, I guess. But I'm just like, what is the collector equivalent of that?
Yeah, it's like a Funko sign.
Yeah, exactly.
But I was trying to figure that out. It captures, not only does it capture that aspect of it, but also the means by which she was caught, right? Like
the faxes. You're like, whoa.
There was still enough time and the world wasn't so connected that you could get away with something like this. Because now you just post something on the net and it's discredited in seconds.
Yeah.
But there was a window and she was the only person who really took advantage, or who was smart enough to take advantage of all the stuff that was there.
Smart enough to take advantage of it, and, you know, she was just so good. Like, like I said, she's making such smart choices, too. I'm like, the whole thing where she can't replicate the signature. Oh, yeah. And she's getting frustrated, and she looks over, and she turns her TV over, and puts a light on it. Just, like, all these little moves of her being smart, and I think that's another thing, too. It's like, yes, she's a good writer, but it's hard to dramatized good writer, she's a brilliant writer, like people say it and she says it and you're like, I guess I believe it, but it's hard to actually depict that. But I think the choice is to make her make these smart and the thing that Jack gives her, whereas, like, you know, he's a shoplifter, but he never just shoplifts the box of toothpaste. He takes the old toothpaste into the store, replaces it, takes the new one, but so no one knows anything's missing. It's like those kind of smart choices.
Which also tells us so much about him.
Absolutely.
In the item that he's using, and that's how he functions with necessities.
Yeah. Like, it's toothpaste. Yeah. You know? No one should be, you know.
Can buy toothpaste for 89 cents. And if you think about it for 2 seconds, it's like, oh, it's not a great grift. Yeah. It's a functional
It's a functional thing. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But it's beautiful the way that all those things are just sort of, they're not even layered in. They're just left right out for us. And we're enjoying the company of these characters so much that we just sort of pass past it. Yeah. And don't even think twice about the mechanics that are involved. On second viewing, just the fact that she goes back to the same 3 bookstores and that her world is really that limited. Yeah. In New York, which is where you're supposed to be able to get and do anything.
My thing is, like, there's more than one person doing that. I don't know. I'm just like, I guess, I don't know. It's back in the day when there was like a million different small bookstores and they weren't all connected. And
exactly, and it's all gone now. That whole world has been
wiped so sad.
I know. I remember the first time I went for any length of time, I was there for a week in 95. So I was 26, 27. Yeah. I somehow, this is such a weird story, I was doing a press junket, a series of junkets, so I was on 5 junkets in 6 days, I think. Okay. So it was, I apologize to the listeners for the construction noises. Sorry.
I was like, can they hear that?
Some of it will be there, yeah.
All right.
But I did the junket for, let me think, 12 Monkeys, Mr. Holland's Opus, Tom and Huck, the Jonathan Taylor Thomas movie.
The 90s, man.
Yeah, it was a
That's
time.
Crazy.
Restoration, a Miramax film with Robert Downey Jr. and Sam Neill and Meg Ryan.
Oh my God.
And the fifth one was Nixon.
Okay.
The
oh my God.
movie. So yeah, I was a freelancer.
The variety.
Yeah, it was one of those things where it's like I calculated how many interviews I could sell based on how many nights it would cost to stay there and all that.
Yes,
and flights
that
and,
math.
Yeah, and it was totally worth it. But I also had, because of the timing, I had like 24 hours with nothing and just got to wander around between.
Okay.
And there were 10 of everything. There were small bookstores on, not just in every neighborhood, but on every corner of every neighborhood.
Yeah.
You could wander around. Like Greenwich Village had 3 in close proximity, and then you go to the east side, and there are all these rare bookstores that had the first editions of everything that she walks past at one point. And it was a constant churn. Like that, if you were constantly finding things, you could sell them every day.
Yeah.
It was, again, it's gone now because we have eBay and Etsy. But it's that perfect recreation of a world that isn't there anymore, and it was only 20 odd years ago. It's really...
I know. It's when it says, it doesn't feel like it's that short back in time. Like 91, I'm like, oh, that's like nothing. They're like, oh my God, it's so long ago. The world has changed so much, and like this is a story that can never happen today. I'm sure there are versions of this story that happen.
Fraud is fraud.
The Instagram influencer pretends she went to Coachella, but she's just sort of like faking photos the whole time. Gets caught like, in 2 seconds because it's so obvious. God,
that's a new movie.
Yeah, there's so many great ones though. The internet has opened up the world of scam. Quite a.
We feel, as spectators, we feel the incredible thrill of watching the elastic band
I know, it's
snap.
so bad.
And I think it is. It's horrible.
Yeah,
it's an awful instinct that we're all...
Yeah, I don't particularly like it when people blow up their lives like that. But I do enjoy the story of how they did it.
Yeah.
And, with... this movie, I was like, it's like she ultimately learned something specific. A bunch of rich people maybe didn't, got ripped off. I mean, unfortunate. It's unfortunate that they lost a couple $1,000s because they bought a letter that was fake.
But it is ultimately close to a victimless crime, right? In a story, in a film, in a story that makes it into a movie. Mm-hmm. It's one
bold.
of those things where it's just like, you didn't actually stab anybody.
Yeah, you actually... Yeah, and it's not like she's victimizing, impoverished people or people who are... It's a very specific... and you can see the derision she has when she goes into the party, her agent's party at the beginning, and she steals the coat. And she's just like, that's my coat, I don't have my ticket. And she runs out. She's like, haha, and, steals the shrimp or whatever. And all that, like that bit about Tom Clancy. It is just... There's so much good comedy in it that you don't realize is hilarious until later because it's so understated. But, she just really doesn't... She doesn't have any patience for, the elite... because she knows she's never going to be that person.
Right. Even though she's writing biographies about them. I mean,
that's true.
It's another contradiction, right? I just assume that it's because she spent all that time learning about these people that she's decided she hates them.
Right. Interesting.
And that she's entitled to, literally, like, that's what she's doing in the party. She's going into the rich people's world and taking what she wants and leaving, which is how she wrote her books. Mm-hmm. And it all kind of makes sense. There's this core of entitlement to her because she's talented, because she believes that she is... talented and has been deprived of success for whatever reason, and the sexism is absolutely part of it. I mean, I think it's great that they got Jane Curtin to play that role as well, because she has to be the sort of hatchet woman for the patriarchy and for the entire structure of New York publishing. And it is someone who spent her entire career defining herself as a strong female lead and a comedian who could do anything and never quite had the same level of success that her Saturday Night Live co-stars had.
It's interesting because when she popped up in this movie, I was like, oh,
yeah, where have you been? I love you.
This is awesome. And she's so good in the role. And then you're right. Like, you think about it after, like, I don't know, what else, like, I'm sure there's been stuff along the way, but nothing that's, like, popped in the way that, someone of her caliber should be.
Yeah, she spent years in a supporting role on 30 Rock from the Sun, I think.
Yeah.
Which, I'm sure it pays the bills, but...
Yeah, it's crazy.
See her in
but you don't see her out developing and, like, producing and, like, doing all these things, which is why Melissa McCarthy is awesome, is because she just does what... I feel like she... Whether you like her comedies or not, no one's telling her what to do. Like, she's just doing it because she wants to, you know? Like, I think that's something to admire, and I think, you know, it's great to... there's the other thing I was going to say is there's also the ageism thing, which she talks about a little bit. She mentions in it, but that scene when she goes into her agent's office, and her agent's like, you know, nobody gives a shit about Fanny Bryce. You can't write that. You know, Tom Clancy's on Larry King. He does every interview. He shows up. He's personable. And, you know, she leaves like, oh, God, like, get me out of this. And the third, you know, and she's like, you're not popping the way you should. And Lee's thing is like, I'm 51 years old. Like, it's over. Like, I'm never, you know, I can't go back. Like, and I think there's a certain sadness to that, that she feels like she can't reinvent. You know, and I think in the 90s that maybe for women was like, you can't reinvent, and hope that's one good thing about, you know, we lost all our used rare bookstores, but, you know, I think, you know, a writer of 51 could maybe reinvent in a meaningful way, hopefully, nowadays. But she just feels like most of her life just passed her by, and she can't start over. She can only live in, you know, what she knows.
Yeah, she's built this suit of armor for herself.
Yeah, and, you know, even being friends, getting a new friend with Jack, which is, you know, fantastic, is very hard for her, and she doesn't trust him. Yeah,
she's affectionate in a wary way.
Yeah, but also, like, so mean, but, you know, and I think that the writer thing is, like, writers are weird on occasion, and have weird thoughts, and can be quite mean, I think, because they're observing the world in a kind of through a different lens in a way. And you know, the one thing a writer always hopes is like, I hope I find a friend who thinks like me. Like, that's like you know, that I can say these awful things to, or I can be super honest with, or I can make this terrible joke and it's gonna be okay. And you just see the relief as like she knows he's accepting, you know, all her terribleness, and loving it, you know, and someone she can have fun with. And then her cat dies on his watch, which is terrible. I get it. She's mad.
But not his fault in a really, like, genuinely sad way.
Yeah, it's awful.
In that we see him trying.
Yeah.
And he hasn't tried at anything.
No, absolutely. He's taking care of the cat. There's clearly a scene where he's like, oh, yep, great. Fed, got the medicine.
We're all waiting for the scene where he gets, you know, like, careless and knocks it over, because that's what Lee's told us to expect. Right. And that's what everything we've seen in his behavior has taught us to expect.
Yeah, he's irresponsible. He doesn't know what's going on. He has no plan. He has no, like, you know, he's dumb.
That felt like a Hall of Center moment. Like, of all the moments in the script that I felt were definitely hers. Yeah. There's that, and then there's the exchange. There's the date that goes so specifically wrong. Yeah.
So you're saying that feels like her moment in the moment where he...
That feels like a writer thinking about what is the thing that people don't want to happen. Yeah. And I will make it happen. Yeah. And it's that we do want him to fuck up, because that would make it a more palatable, normal story that we already think we want to see. Yeah. But by having him do it try and fail, it's actually... Or try to succeed and still lose the cat. It's genuinely painful for everybody.
Right. Because it's inevitable in that way, right? It wasn't someone made a mistake. It was... The cat was going to be Rebecca the cat. But, like, the cat had to die, you know? The cat was dying the whole time, you know?
That's even more of a second act... end of second act tragedy than her getting caught. Yeah. Right? Like, the bigger loss is the loss of the friendship that results from the loss of the cat, or at least the fracturing of it. Yeah. And it's because I think it really lands because he was trying. Yeah. And that makes it awful. Yeah. Because he doesn't try at anything else.
And he's literally he's got like a guy over, he's doing a bunch of drugs, you know, he's barely functioning and still manages to take care of the cat. Yeah. Which, you know, is great, and it makes their breakup so much harder. What's the thing you're going to say about the date?
The date that just doesn't work.
With the bookseller.
The bookseller woman. Yeah. She's sympathetic. She's trying.
She's trying so hard.
And it just doesn't land. And I think that's... Part of it is because Lee sees herself as too old for her and won't let herself open up all the way. Another part of it is because she's hiding a million things. Yeah. But
is it that she knows already, like, this is untenable because... I started lying. Like, the minute I saw you, I was lying. Yeah. You know?
I think so too, but...
she thinks it could work, and then you're just like... Yeah. Just torpedo the whole thing.
Yeah, you watch... I think what's so riveting about the sequence for me is that I'm watching McCarthy play the decision to tank it.
Yeah.
And it just is sort of floating around behind her eyes, and then there's that moment, it's just like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because once you find out that, and it's the full, like, if you find out the truth about me, it's never going to work.
Yeah.
Without the whole scam thing, I've been pulling on you because I'm just not worthy, you know, I'm just not good enough. And
it's that awful crushing.
I also wonder if it's how, also there's part of me that's like, well, she gives her writing. This is like, you know, writers tend to get asked to read things all the time, and I feel like there's a moment where she's like, I'm gonna have to read this. Like,
yeah.
I love her line read of when she says, "Oh, I write some short stories," and you know, I don't know why I told you that. It's probably awful, and she's like, "Yeah, probably." Yeah. She's just like, it's just brutal stuff, but it's great. It's so funny.
Yeah, and it also tells us why she's never succeeded. Like, as a public figure, because she just can't contain that.
She's just not that nice. Like, she just isn't.
And she doesn't respect Tom Clancy, which
No.
is, you know, totally reasonable. And I think that's the first time she does say, right? It is in the film that it's like lists of equipment and things.
Yeah.
That was his big failing as a writer.
Yeah, he's just like a right-wing military. Yeah, he just like lists things.
Which is all true. I mean, I was around for that. I remember the initial, like the whole, they made a selling point out of it. I've always been fascinated by this. Like the whole point of Red October as a book was that it was a sensation, A, because it was a Cold War thriller right when we needed one, but also because all the stuff in it about submarines was accurate and classified. And he just found out by writing into like Jane's ships and various Defense Department
They're sending him like schematics, and he's like, "Oh, okay."
Effectively, yeah. But that's why everybody loved the story of him writing it. Like he was a real estate agent who just found out about this and turned it into a book, and the book turned out to be great. And it's like,
if I was Lee Israel, I'd be pissed too. I'd be like, "That's annoying. It's annoying."
Yeah, because she's doing the same thing,
right?
Like research and getting no rewards whatsoever.
It's and like all her, it's like buying the separate typewriters and like the paper and like getting the watermark or the header, the specific Dorothy part, stationary header, and all that stuff, and that's a great, you know, again, it's like you see her doing the research, doing the work, being smart about it, and you kind of like, no wonder it works. Like, she really put in the effort to make it awesome, and it's successful. It's so great, and there's just so many shots of Melissa McCarthy's face where she just goes through like 50 different things, like standing there waiting in line to like talk to, there's like a shot of her on the subway, like kind of, you know, mouthing like the thing that she's gonna say to the you know, the person. And again, these are all tiny things, you know, this isn't like this massive move, you know, of beats that are happening. It's just all these small moments that build up. And her monologue at the end to the judge, where she's like, "I don't really regret it. Yeah, I kind of it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I was really good at it," you know. And then and the lawyer's like, "What the hell? This is not." Yeah. And then her summation, but I would say it's not worth it. It's just like, you know, and she's like, "I feel like I'm not a good writer," which is when I'm like, "Oh God, you know, don't say that out loud. Let's pretend that never happened." But coming to the end of it and being like, and it wasn't worth it. And then the kicker of the judge being like, "Well, you figured it out. You're fine. House arrest. Pay your, you know, restitution if you get out." And she's like, "Okay." And the lawyer's like, "Yay, we did it." She's like, "Ah, like I can't even get like punished correctly." Yeah. It's so terrible. Like, I didn't even get to go to jail. Like that would, you know, that would have been something.
The experience of it.
Like I just want notoriety for the thing I did, and she can't. You know, it's just she can't get it. It's just kind of interesting. But then she writes her awesome book and gets a movie made about her, so it all works out.
It does all work out.
Decades later.
In exactly the worst way, because she can't see it. She's not alive to see it. It's not an ironic film, right? Like, it's not about someone failing upward or trying to trick the world. I mean, she does, but she doesn't do it on purpose exactly, and it's all just sort of, there's no moment where, as you say, there's no moment where she gets to enjoy the fruits of her labor. It's just when the rent gets paid, that's all. Yeah,
there's a moment when Jack takes her to the piano bar, and like there's just a shot of her watching and enjoying the music, and you've seen her enjoying music, you know, specific music throughout the movie, and you know, it feels like that's a moment where she finally gets to kind of enjoy, you know, they get to go to kind of a fancy bar and she gets dressed up and they have a really great time, but it's small It doesn't last. It doesn't last.
And they still go home alone, effectively.
Yeah, they still go home alone, and, you know, there's lots of... but it's this tiny, tiny moment. And that final shot of the movie with the... where she sees I think it's the Dorothy Parker letter in the window, and it's the one she wrote, and then she kind of, you know, asks how much it cost, and it's like thousands of dollars, and it puts doubt in the bookseller's mind that it's
she's
authentic.
Trying to get him to take it out of the window,
and he takes it out, and she leaves, and he thinks about it, and then he puts it back in the window. It's kind of like, oh, I'm just like, are those letters still floating around out there, Lee Israel?
I think so. Well, it's an indictment of the larger culture, right? Because ultimately this thing she did that was supposed to be so horrible, no one cares. If you can make a buck off of it.
Yeah, absolutely. If it's authentic. She wrote it.
Yeah. You want it to be real.
You want it to be real,
If you are, and that's the idea of the con, right? You can only lose if you delude yourself into thinking that this thing that's too good to be true might not be.
Yeah.
That it might be the real, you know, it sounds just like her. Well, you wouldn't say that if you thought it was her. Right. Like it's
absolutely.
That little seed in there that pulls on people.
But if, you know, it's interesting. It's an interesting con because it's not really hurting anyone.
Yeah.
And some collectors like, well, even if it's not, it's cool. Like, I really like Dorothy Parker, and it's funny, and why not, you know? I have the money to pay for it.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody else is losing their house for lack of rent, right? Like, she's the only one at risk. And it's the classic heist structure where we get to watch the thing happen, the construction, and we get to take part in the joy of pulling off a really good thing. Even if it's illegal or fraudulent, it's still kind of cool. Yeah,
and the tension of her going to Yale and being like, I'm writing a book about writers and alcoholism, and like just simply slipping the letter in and out of her boot and all that stuff. It's just like the fun and games of that, and it doesn't feel... you don't feel gross about it because you're like, I kind of want her to get away with it, you know?
You absolutely do.
Because you've been with her for so long, going through so many terrible things, and
and that's McCarthy's quality as an actor too, where in the breakout roles, she's larger than life and obnoxious, and there's no way you'd want to be around this person in real life.
Right.
But in the context of I'm watching this person and enjoying the hell out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
She's so good at that. She welcomes us into bad behavior, and here she's doing the same thing, right? But she's contextualized it in a human way where it's all based on need and neurosis and whatever other resentments are going on. We're on her side before she ever does anything wrong.
Absolutely.
Because A, she's the star of the movie, but B, she has that ability to...
Yeah, but she walks that line, right? Where she's awful and terrible and mean and an asshole, and then, you know, she kind of like softens her eyes and looks really sad, and you're like, oh.
Yeah, she always lets us see the why of it.
Yeah, which is amazing.
Yeah.
I think she's fantastic. She should have won an Oscar.
I'm kind of sad. I mean, I'm glad Olivia Colman won over
lots of good performances.
Oh, yeah. Now I'm starting to sound like a dick. It's like Glenn Close is better than that movie.
Yeah.
It's not her fault, but that's not the role. The whole idea that someone is due, right? That's so exhausting.
It's so exhausting, and it's always like, particularly with female roles, is that when you have a year where there's like multiple amazing female roles, and then a year where it's not that great, and it's a struggle, and you're like, I don't know why so-and-so won a role for that not great role. It's really hard, and I feel like last year was one of those years where there was multiple actresses that had amazing roles, and a lot of the times that's what it is. It's the roles, and, you know, when you get a great actress in there, they're just killing it, and you know they're going to kill it, and unfortunately so did 8 other people this year, so it's hard. Yeah. But I was glad to kind of see this movie in the... You know, there's always a lot of conversation about female directors not kind of being in that conversation for awards consideration. And, you know, the counter argument is always, oh, well, they're not making the kind of movies that kind of warrant it or are of a certain, you know, level, which is, it. You know, my thing is like, but someone's making choices about, you know, an Oscar campaign is a strategy. It's got money. It's got... tons of stuff and a complete machine behind it, right? Like, this is something that is very strategic, and someone at some level is making a choice about which movie they're going to back and what performances they're going to back. So I was, you know, even though this movie flew under the radar to a certain extent, I was kind of glad to see, is it Marielle? Is that how you pronounce it?
I think it's Marielle.
She was kind of in the mix of some of those conversations, and obviously the Oscar nomination for the screenplay. And, I feel like they got to make choices, and if they're going to back the movie, then it's going to get, warrant those nominations and everything. So I was glad to kind of see that. That made me happy.
Yeah.
Because it's not a movie that's, like, loud and, drawing a lot of attention. It's very low-key, and, again, it's a small movie, but it warrants, the craft is there.
Yeah.
On so many levels. So.
It's a movie about a feeling rather than an event, so it's harder to sell on that level. But it contains worlds. It's
Absolutely.
about stuff. It's about so many things. Even at the end, I was worried that folding in the AIDS crisis would be a problem, just because we know where that's going.
Yeah.
But then I found out that there's an entire generation that didn't know about it.
Right.
That wasn't expecting, that was genuinely shocked. And a few younger critics are like, oh, and I didn't realize that was,
that was what was going on.
I didn't know that's where it was going. And it's like, are you? And then I realized they missed it.
Yeah.
It's like we're in a place now where HIV is just not a death
20 years
sentence,
ago,
right?
and somehow a whole generation of people are like, oh, yeah, I guess that was bad. Like, it's crazy.
It's stunning that you can move that quickly culturally. Yeah. And I guess it's a good thing generally that obviously it's a good thing for people with HIV, but that culturally that people are forgetting collectively what was going on. And it was everywhere, not just in the news, but culturally.
Yeah.
And so it's good that it's over, but it's bizarre that I just find it so strange that people are being shocked by it.
Yeah.
In this film. And yet it's played with there's absolutely no question of Jack's sexuality or who he is or what he's doing. From scene to scene, it's not like it's right there in plain sight unless you don't know what you're looking at.
Yeah.
But it's so beautifully presented and not condescended to in the movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like he's just a guy with bad judgment.
Yeah.
And we know, like, if you know the story, if you know the era, we know where that's going to end up. But it doesn't feel like it's mandated narratively.
Yeah.
It's just, of course this happened to him.
Yeah, and it's also like Lee's response to him and his, liaisons, and when he comes and he's all beat up and he's like, oh, I don't know, whatever he says. And she's like, I'm not going to pretend to even understand what you're doing, but whatever, like she's not judging him for any of it in anything other than a friendly, like, joshing, leeway. And then at the end, she's like, I was going to trip you, he's walking out, like, it's just such a beautiful, there's no, she's not crying, there's no, like, oh my God, I'm sorry you're dying. It's just, they are themselves. Yeah. Through and through, in every scene that they're in. Right to the bitter end, and the moment where he gives her permission to write about him. Yeah. She's like, I've written 5 chapters or whatever she says. She's like, well, I've already done it. So, like it's just a really, really lovely back and forth between them.
I was so glad to see Grant get recognized for it as well, because it is, like, if you've followed his work as I absolutely have since the Withnell days, it's just like he is a delight from start to finish. And I was worried that people would just say, oh, that's a fun, eccentric performance from him, and not realize just, where he's going and what he's doing with that character. And at least he got the nomination out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now he's in Star Wars, and I don't know how that works, but that's
Wait, which Star Wars?
He's in the next one. He's in The Rise of Skywalker, yeah.
Oh my God.
No, it'll be great.
It'll be great.
I hope he's a droid. I don't know why. I want him to be C-3PO's cranky brother.
Maybe he'll just take over for C-3PO. Maybe they're putting C-3PO out to retirement.
Yeah. I guess Richard E. Grant could fit in the suit. But it's just one of those... You
want to see his face, though.
You do. Yeah, it's true. Yeah. It's what they missed in Solo with Phoebe Waller-Bridge being a motion control character.
Yeah.
Motion capture.
You miss a lot there. Yeah.
But it's just... It's the kind of pairing, too, that, I believe he was not originally... Well, you know the story, right? It wasn't going to be McCarthy. It wasn't going to be Heller. Originally, it was going to be Hollow Center directing Julianne Moore. Moore says that Hollow Center fired her a week before the production was supposed to start. She told Vanity Fair, Julianne Moore told Vanity Fair, she fired me. And here's the other thing, she was going to be doing it with Chris O'Dowd, which I'm still trying to wrap my head around.
Yeah, that's a bit crazy.
Yeah.
He's so young.
He is. I think he's got to be a decade younger than Grant, maybe even more. He's... for those of you trying to figure out who Chris O'Dowd is listening, he was the love interest in Bridesmaids of all things.
mostly a
probably
comedic actor, but there's lots of comedy in the role, and I'm sure he's pretty strong otherwise. But
he could have done it, I'm sure, but Grant is so good at it.
I know.
So
it's so hard to even picture someone else doing it.
Yeah, so the project fell apart after Moore left.
Right.
And then
there's probably lots of financing,
scheduling, timing, and Searchlight all led to Halifax Center not being able to do it when they mounted it the second time. Supposedly, she wanted Heller to take it, and Heller has spoken about it. I know at TIFF she said that she wouldn't have done it if Halifax Center didn't want her to do it.
Amazing.
And then Heller hired Grant, who didn't meet McCarthy until a week before they were going to shoot.
I think I saw that McCarthy came on really late, which is mind-blowing.
Yeah. Well, she's making 3 other features at the time or something, because she just, that Life of the Party came out in May of last year, and I think she was shooting this when that came out. They were still finishing it.
Okay.
It was a really quick turnaround.
Yeah.
Which, again, makes it even more impressive that there's a consistent character and performance in there.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure she probably took it on because she felt close to it and probably felt she had confidence to do it. Again, I feel like Melissa McCarthy's like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think she hesitates very much.
No, I think she makes choices and goes and does it,
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I met her when she came to TIFF on the St. Vincent Press year.
Oh, yeah.
And
another great
great performance
from her, yeah.
And she said the trick for that was that she had to, how did she put it? She said her instinct, everybody's instinct when they meet Bill Murray is that they want to impress him and they want to overdo it, and then she just had to realize she had to just take it down.
Yep.
And she said, I just want to show you my trick, Bill. I want to show you the one thing I know I can do. And it's like, I'm not doing that. Just do the acting.
Yeah, it's very smart.
Yeah, she is. She talked about, we spoke at length about how important it was to her that she and Ben Falcone, her husband, steer themselves. They want to be the ones making the movies. He shows up in this, of course he does.
Yeah, absolutely, he does.
Marvelous.
He's such a dick to her.
Yeah.
He ruins everything.
And somehow it's okay because we know they don't really mean it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's that one weird moment where it becomes a Melissa McCarthy movie because this guy's in it.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
To the point where now they're getting it out of the way. Have you seen Life of the Party?
Is that the one? I want to see it. Is it worth seeing?
The back to school one. Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to see it because I feel like it would be hilarious and
it's pretty. It's
you don't really
fun.
have to think too much, but
yeah. He's in that as well. He directed it, but he's in it. And at this point now they're just getting a cameo out of the way right up top, like Hitchcock.
Right.
He plays her Uber driver in the first scene or something. It's just like, okay, but yeah.
Does you spot the Ben Falcone?
I think basically it's easier now.
Yeah.
If he shows up, wastes the camera and moves on. But there's a comfort she has with him where they're almost always mean to each other on screen, which I find absolutely delightful, and I really hope never means they break up.
Yes, exactly.
That'll ruin everything.
Yeah, that would ruin it. I feel like they just get it out of their system when they're doing those scenes, and
it feels like
they're so happy, so happy with each other at home because they got it out of the way.
Yeah. It's and having him in Can You Forgive Me does kind of put the film into her larger canon and her
which is kind of crazy because if she just joined very close to the actual production, she still managed to get her husband in the movie. It's kind of a baller move. She still managed to pull that off because clearly that was a role in the movie prior to her involvement.
Yeah, I think it just makes her more comfortable knowing that they're both there.
But I wonder if she's by the way, this is how it's going to be. And they're just okay.
Yeah, although again, for that role, why wouldn't you hire him? He's
absolutely. I just feel like that's awesome.
Yeah.
Of her to be yeah, okay, I'll do it. But
yeah, it's a means of not control exactly, more it's a means of perpetuating a legend.
Yes.
So they're always together somewhere.
Yeah, her legacy is protected.
Yeah. But it is such a yeah, even if this was the only time she'd done a dramatic role, she just nails it so well. There is that thing that comedians always seem inclined to do, which is just pour on the pathos.
Yeah.
And, whenever Jim Carrey is doing a dramatic role, with the sole exception of Eternal Sunshine, he just goes, he tilts into it. Mm-hmm. You can always feel where they're trying too hard to just show us. Or they do what, like Steve Carell's thing where he shuts himself down because he's in a drama, and somehow that it's serious performance,
weird.
But it embodies seriousness.
Yeah, I'm serious now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With McCarthy's skill, I think, is that she really just convinces us that she doesn't care how we take the performance. And that's why Lee Israel's perfect for her.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's her performance in Bridesmaids as well is very broad, and she's meant to be the weird one.
Yeah.
And she goes to the off, and then has a scene where she says the theme of the whole movie was like, I like myself, and you're just like, oh, yeah. And it's just such a bold thing for that kind of character to say. It's like, I like myself, and if you don't like me, then you're on my team, you're not on my team, I'm on my team, and it's just from that particular performance on, that's what she's taken into everything. It's like, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
You don't have to like it, but I like me, and I think that's why her performance in Can You Ever Forgive Me is so great, is because underneath there somewhere is the thing that she should be, you know, and then you just have to go through all this hell and watch her kind of make a bunch of mistakes and be, the awfulness that she is, but she gets there kind of at the end, Yeah. Also, my favorite moment in the movie is when she sits at her typewriter. This is after her scene with her agent, who's like, go fucking write something, and she sits down, she's like, can we swear on this? I don't know.
Sure.
She sits there, she's at her typewriter, she's, nothing's coming, and then she starts typing. We're like, oh, she's gonna write something great, and then there's a shot of the thing, and she's like, I'm sitting down to fucking type. This is me sitting down to fucking type, and I've done that.
Yes,
I've done that. I faced the blank page or that blinking cursor a million times, and I'm just like, I hate everything, but this is a sentence that I'm writing right now, and I'm just like, I relate to that. It's and I'm sure everyone who has to write something ever can relate to that, but I just like that kind of thing is, again, this is a writer. This is a story about a writer, which is so. I think it's a rare thing to be able to do, but so well done in this movie from all angles.
Yeah, it's honest in a way that movies about writers almost never are. In that it is boring and dull and unrewarding, and I don't know anybody who likes the experience of typing.
Yes.
Not a single person has ever said I had the best time writing this.
Yeah.
It's I love that I've done this now.
Yeah. After the fact. Yeah. Or those times when you don't remember actually doing it, and it's over, and you're like, oh yeah, I wrote that. Okay, great. So glad. I don't know where I went, but it's done.
I don't have a lot of those. I wish I could unlock that skill, because I assume I'd get more done.
Yeah. That's the thing. It's like, no matter how much writing you do, you could always do more and be more productive. Like, I could be writing all day and still be like, why haven't I written 3 feature film screenplays in the last year? I had time. Yeah. I had lots of time, and I just didn't do it, and it's kind of depressing.
You have all these tweets now.
Yeah, all these tweets texts about who's picking the kids up where. Like, there's a whole novel in my phone, and I don't know. Like, I spent some time typing. It wasn't anything, I could sell, unfortunately. But I did it.
Yeah. It's really the accomplishment. It's the fact that
sense of accomplishment.
Yeah, the fact that any of us can put any words down in order at all, I find absolutely stunning. Like, how did we figure this out? And
I don't know.
Why did we think we could
pictures? I feel like I could have drawn. It would have been better. Yeah.
Well, the obvious question then is in terms of your own work. Like, is it as stressful? Is it as like if this film resonates with you, is it that same level all the time? Or
Sometimes I related to a lot of things in this movie in terms of the struggle to sit down at the blank page, and the sense of like, is this a thing that people like? I like this, but again, like what we talked about is like, is this a thing that can then help me viably live, Yeah. How long can I go between making money doing this and not making money doing this before I just can't do this anymore?
Yeah.
And so that's the parts that resonated with me. And I think, again, I've had moments where I've been antisocial and not up for whatever has to be done, but I'm learning to be better at it. And, watching this movie, it's like, the agent does kind of have a point that you've got to show up and you got to be, you have to be able to talk about your work. For a long time, I was like, I don't want to talk about my work. I just, Lee says, it's like, but I'm doing my job. I'm writing. Why do I have to show up for the thing? Why do I have to show up for the, I did the thing. It's already out there. So that sense of like, my job is to write, my job isn't this other thing, and coming to terms with the fact that it's the whole thing. As an artist, you have to be able to do all the things, which makes it challenging because there's, 100% of the things that you have to do, and you only really care about a small percentage of those things, or you only feel that you're good.
Yeah.
I'm like really bad at the other stuff, but I think I can do this, and that's what I related to her. It's easier now, only because it does feel like I kind of know what I have to do.
Right. You developed the muscle.
I developed the muscle and the reflex of like, I got to do it. I've been in production enough on TV shows where there's 150 people waiting for the pages. You have to give them something. And so I carry that into feature work, that there is more of a workman-like attitude I bring to it. But there are still stories that I have that I know I must write them, and I just cannot, And I'm like, I'm of a certain age at a certain point in my career, I'm just like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if it's going to happen. So, it's that ongoing struggle. So it's slightly easier at this point in my career, but it's not, I don't think I would be okay if it was just chill and super easy. Like, I feel like that would be unsatisfying. And so that it's a challenge and it's hard, and, there's always insecurities and uncertainties. I think it's part of it. It's just part of it. It's part of the game, in a way.
That's a horrible game.
It's a horrible game. It's the worst.
I know. I always try to keep myself out of this in terms of when I talk to other writers, because it's not, I don't do the same thing, but there is a point where it's just like, I would really rather do anything else than meet this deadline, whatever it is. And I'm amazed at what I can come up with to distract myself, but I know it's not healthy. And you just get stuck in this feedback loop of your own brain, and it's just like, I do this every day. Why is it hard now?
Why is it hard today? Like, what changed from yesterday?
It's not like there's something really good on TV.
Yes.
The world hasn't changed, but I can't get going.
And then you feel bad, and that makes you feel worse, and then you can't write. Yeah, it's a struggle. It always is, and I think for me, it's like, I just need to be patient with myself. Like, I know I will probably blow deadlines. But like, give me a deadline. Like, that's the thing with, like, if people are like, well, when do you think you can have it in? I'm like, you tell me. I'm gonna write it the night before. Probably.
We all will.
But I will, I'll give it to you. But you need to tell me, because if you give me the choice, you're not getting it.
Exactly.
It'll take as much time as humanly possible. So you need to tell me. That's kind of my...
I feel that.
Yeah.
I mean, I have the advantage of writing for a weekly, so there's always the same deadline over and over again, and I can work around it or to it. But it's just, I mean, I'm at least writing reactive mode. I'm processing something and talking about it. You have to create things.
Create it,
That seems more intimidating. So.
Yeah, it is, and you also know what's coming, which is a million people with opinions about it. Valuable opinions, logical opinions, like logistical opinions that are all, if the goal is to produce something, to shoot it and produce it and have people see it, it's not just whatever comes out of my head. There's a million other considerations, things that have to be decided and affect the story and affect the writing. So it's that skill as well, like, I can kind of come up with stuff and be like, okay, cool, and then someone's like, I don't understand this. This makes no sense. I'm like, but it's all there.
It made sense to me when I did it. Yeah.
This is not shootable. I'm like, what? The big tsunami? What? You can't shoot that? We have all the special effects. Yeah, we can't shoot it.
Well, as far as Ordinary Days goes, I mean, that couldn't have been an easy sell. It's a triptych for people who haven't seen it. It's three separated stories that are the same narrative. Each directed by a different director. And the miracle of it to me is that tonally it is one piece, and it manages to build suspense by pivoting away from suspense, like by keeping
Interesting.
by keeping the main thrust of the story in the background. We're always worried about it, but it doesn't dominate the way that a thriller is supposed to, which makes it feel even stranger, which makes it more involving. My copy editor just pushed back when I said that there's an absence that grows more involving. And it's like, well, it does. You just
like, wait, what does that mean? But you're right, it is, and that's the ordinary days of it. Is that this whole thing is happening? You don't know exactly what's happening, but people are just still kind of like cleaning the oven and like, going to the ultrasounds and like it feels like why are they doing that? But you don't know what's happened, and so you're just kind of going along hoping for the best, and that this worry or this nagging anxiety is going to go away. It's going to get released because she's going to call, and that's sort of the trick of it a little bit. Yeah.
And was that easy to convey to people?
I think so. There's kind of two pieces to it. Was that I wrote this as a sample, a spec, a script, because I wanted to try some stuff. Like it was really like, let me work out how this could be, with the idea that it was to be low budget, kind of film and shootable, and never at any point until we kind of decided to make it was there a conversation about 3 directors. So it was, I think, the 3 directors, which was kind of the thing that people were like, oh, okay, and in Canada it's very hard for directors to kind of make feature films. It can be really challenging for them to get into the system, as it were. I'm sure you know a lot about that.
Oh yeah.
So this is a way for 3 directors to make a feature film together without owning a whole feature film. So it was a producerial kind of decision that worked. But again, like I was there. Aaron Hansen, the editor, edited all 3 parts. We had the same DOP throughout, same production designer. Lots of conversation between the 3 directors. We had tone meetings together. I had tone meetings separately with them. I kind of, was kind of the overlord of the thing, knowing that each director has very specific, very strong creative choices that they want to make, and was working very closely with their sort of specific cast, actors. But I was able to kind of, okay, if you do that here, that's going to affect 2, that's going to affect 3, and kind of just make sure all that stuff lined up. So it was challenge. It was hard.
Yeah.
3 directors is hard. 3 amazingly talented, strong directors is amazing, but also they want to make the best movie possible, and it's sort of, okay, how can they get what they need? How can we all work together in this team-like atmosphere? But also they get to imprint, their style and their artistry into it. But somehow we got to pull it off, and I'm like, whoo, we did it, yay!
Yeah.
But it was a lot, and we shot it in 15 days. There's lots of things that had to change on the fly, and everyone was really nimble, and thankfully our crew was kind of up for it, and our cast was really locked in onto their characters, so they were able to kind of do it. But Jordan did 5 days in the house. Chris had 5 days all over the place, which was hugely challenging, and the crew was like, all of a sudden we're making a police investigation movie in a bunch of different locations. We've been in this house for 5 days. So the crew was kind of like, and our cinematographer Mike McLaughlin, you'd be directing with one director, and then another director would come in doing the same scene. Yeah. And he was kind of like, what's happening? Okay, so everyone had to be really flexible and kind of, but I feel like everyone was up for it by the time we got there. And then, of course, part 3, no spoilies, but
we won't discuss it.
Very contained, again, in another 5 days, shot chronologically. So it was, but again, you have the 3 directors that just kind of came in and killed it, and, I couldn't ask for, a better effort from everyone. It was a crazy experience.
Yeah, and unfortunately breaks the format of the podcast a little bit, because usually I ask people what of the film that they've absorbed it, but your film was made before, I think before Can You Ever Forgive Me went to camera. Yeah. So is there anything that you've taken from the film, from Can You Ever Forgive Me, now that you will use in future, or is it more like
I think it's more what I take from this, what I take from this movie is less specific to Ordinary Days and more specific to me personally as a writer, which is that, you know, you kind of have to step up a little bit. You know, I've spent a lot of my career being able to kind of, you know, I've been very lucky. I've worked with people who have championed me, you know, and I've been able to kind of do a lot of very different kinds of projects. And now I feel like I'm at the place where it's like, okay, now if I can help others as well, that's kind of the role I'm kind of moving into. I feel I have lots to write myself, but you know, it's about kind of looking back in kind of the way, you know, this happened with Marielle, like going back and saying, well, who else in the world can be pulled up, you know, and making good choices about who to work with and all that. So that's kind of like, I don't want to be Lee. I don't want to be like, oh, it's just me and like I'm here and like, you know, I'm just going to be a writer and I should, you know, have everything I want. It feels like it's a bigger, you know, especially in Canadian film too. Like I feel like, where are we going? How can we, you know, improve? So that there's lots of different kinds of movies being made and that audiences are looking to watch, and like, how can we all do that? So it's a conversation, you know, Glenn and I've had quite a bit and how we can do that. So that's kind of what I took from that. I don't know if that really answered your question specifically, but yeah. I feel like this movie really has inspired me to be like, oh, get out of your head. Yeah. You know, get out of your head, look around, you know, take action.
Yeah. Don't be Lee.
Yeah, don't be Lee. It's not going to work.
Don't be Jack either. Because it's not healthy in the long run. But yeah, I mean, certainly as a what not to do movie.
Yeah, what not to do. Yeah, exactly. But if you're going to what not to do, and ultimately end up, you know, writing a best-selling book and get it adapted into an Academy Award-nominated movie, then maybe that's fine.
I guess.
If you can reach that far into the future, that might work. But
it's a good way out.
Yeah, I mean, you don't see that coming until a long ways away.
Yeah.
But
it's not like you can bank on a retirement plan or anything.
Not. I wouldn't. Yeah, that's. You might want to have some alternates for that, but.
Buy low, sell high.
Yeah, exactly. Is that what they do? I don't even know.
I think that's what they do.
Just put it under the mattress.
My thanks to Ramona Barckert, writer and producer of the new movie Ordinary Days, on screens right now in Toronto, Halifax, and Edmonton. It's very good, and you should go see it. It'll be on demand fairly soon, but try to catch it in a theater if you can. Thanks also to Angie Power. She knows what she did. You can find Ramona on Twitter at Ramona Barckert, all one word, and you can find Can You Ever Forgive Me on Blu-ray and DVD from 20th Century Fox Home Entertainment. It's also available on iTunes and Google Play. Oh, and slight correction to the Tom Clancy story. He was an insurance agent, not a realtor. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner and elsewhere on the internet at nowtoronto.com. You can also find this podcast on Twitter at Semcast, S-E-M-Cast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. If you feel like leaving a review on iTunes or Apple Podcasts or wherever you enjoy the show, that would be greatly appreciated. Every little bit helps, it truly does. Thanks for your support, and thanks for listening.